All right, I'm very honored to have been asked to speak with you today. I wish that we could be together in person, but I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to talk about my programs virtually. I've been at the Defense Standardization Program Office for almost 5 years now. And prior to that, I had the pleasure of supporting all Naval Air Systems Command NAVAIR program offices with obsolescence management for approximately 15 years. I was a DMSMS lead there prior to this job. Now I have the pleasure of managing the parts management and DMSMS management programs for the Department of Defense. Next slide, please. Before I start, though, I thought I'd talk a little bit about the organization I work for, the Defense Standardization Program Office, DISPO. As you can see on the left side of this slide, DISPO reports to the Office of Secretary of Defense within the Research and Engineering Organization. On the right side, you can see the DISPO team and the program or the programs each person leads or supports. I highlighted mine. Besides parts and DMSMS management, DISPO supports the Joint Standardization Boards, additive manufacturing, counterfeit, modular open systems architecture initiatives, etc. We offer education and training for successful implementation of standards, provide guidance to over 100 DoD standardization management activities, participate in non-government standard bodies and standards developing organizations, and provide tools for accessing standards. To do this, we engage with industry, other federal agencies, and allies like NATO and partners on standardization matters. Next slide. What I will discuss with you today are my two programs, Parts Management and DMSMS Management. I will hopefully show you the synergy between the two and describe what I mean by DMSMS resilient designs, and then talk about some strategic objective projects we're working on, tell you about some resources that you have access to before I conclude, and hopefully leave enough time to answer a few questions. Next slide. As many of you know, today's weapon systems are characterized by rapidly changing technology, accelerated timelines, and service life extensions. There has been an increased use of commercial off-the-shelf assemblies. Some of our parts are manufactured overshore, so we need to consider the source of supply and whether the parts are qualified for the application in which they are to be used. Our systems are plagued with diminishing manufacturing sources and material shortages issues. Counterfeit parts have been detected in our supply chain. We also need to consider reduction of hazardous substances such as lead-free, restrictions. Other considerations is the environment in which the part will be used. For example, parts used in land-based aircraft may not be suitable for use in ship-based aircraft that operate in severe marine environments and are more exposed to corrosion. All these factors have increased risk for weapon systems and equipment. So the need to have an effective DMSMS obsolescence management, parts management program is greater than ever before. How you select your parts in design is key to success. Next slide. The parts management we're focusing on today is part selection. Selecting parts wisely in design. This process determines the optimum parts you select. A comprehensive parts management program is cradle to grave management of parts. It encompasses good parts selection criteria, which we're currently working on updating and would be interested in hearing about how you select your parts in design. Why should we do this? Well, standardization and replacing numerous similar parts with one common part results in larger part type buys because common parts are used in multiple applications. This demand helps with DMSMS. It also avoids the increased cost of maintaining technical data, storing, tracking, distributing multiple parts. When systems share common components, repair time is shorter because parts are more likely to be on hand. This simplifies logistics support because fewer parts are stocked. You get savings in procuring, testing, warehousing, and transporting parts. Using preferred parts helps avoid expenses and delays of designing and developing parts and the issues of acquiring a new item with no available history or documentation. Preferred parts reduce risk and improve the chances of equipment reliability. They have a history of proven reliability, withstanding rigorous testing and performing at stated levels. Next slide. So with that said, for the parts management program, it's my responsibility to create and revise our parts management policy and guidance, assess how effective our parts management programs are, update our parts management guide, our SD-19, promote education and engagement, and pursue strategic objective projects to work on that help combat challenges that we face, fill gaps that we have, or make us more efficient than we already are. Next slide. You probably all know this, but in case some of you don't, and to set the stage, diminishing manufacturing sources and material shortages, DMSMS, also known as obsolescence, is when you go to buy an item, a part you need, and you can't or won't be able to soon, because the manufacturer has decided to discontinue production of that item. Now you're running around like your hair is on fire, trying to find out what to do. While traditionally thought of as applying to electronic items, it's important to note that an obsolescence issue can happen with any item within a system, including software and non-electronic components. DMSMS issues are caused by many factors, as seen on this slide: low volume market demand, new business strategies, new or evolving technology, changes to detection limits, toxicity values, and regulations related to chemicals and materials. Another aspect of obsolescence is when an item, although still available, no longer functions as intended because the requirements changes to the system. This is functional obsolescence. Any of these situations may endanger ongoing production capabilities or the life cycle support of a system. Next slide. So I've already mentioned DMSMS becoming more prevalent as a result of rapid technology changes, increased use of COTS items, and longer operational lives of military systems. Historically, large systems can require a decade or more to develop and then have fielded life that spans decades. Yet the life cycle of items are brief by comparison. 18 months for COTS or electronic items, about 5 years for COTS software. I added some other examples on this slide. And as mentioned before, environmental or regulatory restrictions can happen at any time as well. Because system life cycles are longer than technology life cycles, obsolescence issues are inevitable. We cannot afford to be reactive in this area. Reactivity may lead to a combination of schedule delays, readiness degradations, and higher costs. Because of all of this, DMSMS management is necessary. Next slide. You know, our B-52s are as old as 1952 Cadillacs, A-10s as old as 1977 Chevy Caprice, B-1s and 1986 Ford Taurus. You get the point. Next slide. So what constitutes robust DMSMS or obsolescence management? It is what we call risk-based proactive DMSMS management in our SD-22 DMSMS guidebook. It's when we load our indentured parts lists, our bills of materials, into obsolescence predictive tools, for electronic parts and do market surveys for non-electronic parts, and forecast when obsolescence issues are going to arise. By doing this, we're increasing our window of opportunity and buying us time to make more cost-effective decisions. This gives us more time to consider all applicable options. It minimizes out-of-cycle redesigns in the future. It also helps to eliminate schedule impacts, increases operational availability, and helps control total ownership costs. To be honest, this and our ability to verify and validate and solve obsolescence issues reported is how I was able to get buy-in from program offices to spend the money on DMSMS management, especially since DMSMS is inevitable. It's going to happen, so why not plan for it instead of waiting until you try to buy a part you need and you can't, which is being reactive. But I think that we can do better than this. I believe that even when we're being proactive, we're still just waiting for problems to occur. Also, the crystal ball in DMSMS management is fuzzy. So no matter how proactive you try to be, obsolescence issues will still occur unexpectedly. Since DMSMS tools are not 100% accurate, or we may not have up-to-date parts lists for all of our systems. So in a few slides, I will challenge us to thinking more strategically and attempt to tie this all together. Hopefully you're excited to hear more, and I haven't put you all to sleep by now. Next slide. And just quickly, because this is itself is a 4-hour training, our process is broken down into 5 steps and gives you guidance on how to establish a DMSMS program, monitor your parts, assess the impact of issues by doing health assessments and operational impact analyses, determine resolutions and make sure they're implemented. Something new we included in the 2021 update of the SD22 DoD DMSMS guidebook is that circle that you see around the steps called strategize. It's a tie to parts management and parts selection, really. Building DMSMS resilient designs, which I will describe soon, I promise. Next slide. This is an example of a DMSMS health assessment that I just mentioned. It integrates estimated obsolescence dates, usage rates, items due, and stocks on hand to highlight when an item or assembly will no longer be supportable. It guides the program's overall technology management strategy plan and roadmaps to synchronize efforts to address technology trends and requirement-driven product upgrades. I can't stress enough that incorporating a technology management strategy, which is influenced by DMSMS health assessments, into design, acquisition, and sustainment activities is a best practice to further reduce DMSMS cost and readiness impacts throughout the life cycle. Given this understanding of when and what within the system will be affected by obsolescence, the DMSMS team can recommend the most cost-effective resolution at the piece part level or next higher assembly, wherever appropriate. And ultimately, DMSMS shouldn't be the sole reason for redesign. In my opinion, it should be for better reliability, improved performance, more mission capability, etc. While you're doing this, you design out obsolescence and you assure that you're building DMSMS resilient designs. Next slide. Many different types of resolution options exist for resolving an obsolescence issue. These resolutions fall into 3 broad categories. There's existing material, substitutes, and redesign. As a program progresses through the various resolution categories, the amount of research and the number of cost elements required to implement a resolution increases. If you'd like to see the definition and examples of each of these options, I recommend that you look at the SD22 DMSMS guidebook. Next slide. So as the program manager for DMSMS management program, I am, like the parts management program, responsible for creating and revising policy, being the champion for standardized DMSMS management, education, and training, figuring out how effective we are in establishing strategic objective projects that help us overcome challenges, fill gaps, or improve our efficiency. And last but not least, promote sharing of information and collaboration amongst the military departments and other organizations outside the Department of Defense. Next slide. One thing that just happened recently, and I'm very, and I think it's going to be very helpful, is our new DMSMS management policy. It was just published in November of 2020. The last directive on DMSMS management was in 1976. So since 1976, there had been no department-wide policy that clearly defines the requirements for DMSMS management. Because the program offices varied in their implementation of comprehensive DMSMS management. So what does this instruction do for us, really? It gives us clear direction to higher level organizations to establish policy and guidance for DMSMS management. This is important because it provides continuity of practice across all organizations that deal with obsolescence issues. It requires that DoD component heads establish, develop, and implement integrated, risk-based, proactive policy, procedures, regulations, guidance, and training. There hasn't been a clear DMSMS requirement for DMSMS management for many decades. The instruction requires that DMSMS management be integrated in all aspects of DoD equipment, from development to disposal. It standardizes DMSMS management requirements across the services. This should enable collaboration at a level that we've not yet experienced, and the institution of proactive DMSMS management in all organizations that have military equipment. Plus, last but not least, we should be saving the government money and increasing readiness. Next slide. So now is my attempt to tie this all together. We know that early design decisions impact sustainment. I recall when I began supporting designing in obsolescence in initial designs and redesigns all the time. I also remember how difficult it was for logisticians and obsolescence subject matter experts to be included in systems engineering technical reviews, even though we know design decisions made early in a program have a substantial impact on operations and support costs later in the program. So with that said, I think that we should be creating DMSMS resilient designs to try and avoid DMSMS issues altogether, in addition to delaying their occurrence when they cannot be prevented. So what do I mean by DMSMS resilience? It's a property of a design that reduces the likelihood of near-term DMSMS issues and increases the probability of a quick recovery when issues do occur. DMSMS resilience is achieved by selecting long life cycle items, avoiding single sources of supply, using open system architecture in design, and other techniques. And that, folks, is done during parts management when you select your parts. No brainer, right? The problem is that it isn't being done very often. Not considering parts management in the design phase will be the driving force for obsolescence issues later in the life of a system. And that is what I mean by thinking more strategically. Early in the life cycle, in design, we need to ensure we're not designing in obsolescence and a bunch of problems that will cost us a lot of money in sustainment. Let's design for sustainability. We can do this by ensuring that we are requiring industry to have a solid parts management program and that we have visibility and oversight of the parts that are chosen. This is why there's so much synergy between part selection, parts management, and DMSMS. Next slide. I chair a parts and material management working group. While having fun, as you can see on this slide, we champion proactive part selection and DMSMS management, best practices, synergies, and standardization through education, training, and outreach in DoD and industry. There's approximately 400 people in the group, 60% government and about 40% industry. I have a DMSMS and parts management lead for each military department. We're currently working on about a dozen strategic objective projects for both programs. I'll talk about some in the next 2 slides. We also have been hosting monthly training, sometimes twice a month, since March 2020. I plan to continue to do that until we can meet in person again and maybe even after. The attendance has been phenomenal, over 700 participants for just one. And you're all welcome to attend our trainings. I usually post what we're offering on LinkedIn. So if you have an account there, you can follow me and get that information. I'm also currently planning a 2021 Parts and Material Lifecycle Management Conference, formerly known as the DMSMS Conference, the week of December 13th in the Colorado Rockies. It's through working groups and events like these that we can share information and leverage off of each other's capabilities and resources. Next slide. We have another great resource, the SD26 DMSMS Contract Language Guide, which we're adding parts management language to. Because in that assessment that I keep talking about, we didn't find much parts management language on contracts. Only a few organizations make parts management a requirement. Our main military standard that addresses part selection is MIL Standard 3018, Parts Management. It doesn't specifically tell contractors how to do part selection, but it does require that they document their part selection procedure in a parts management plan. MIL Standard 3018 has an order of precedence or preference for selecting parts. We're in the process of updating this as well and making it complement the MIL Standard 11991A, which is called General Standard for Parts, Materials, and Processes. I've also adopted the IEC 62402 2019 version for DMSMS management to site and contracts and helping to update the SAE standard 0016 for DMSMS management plans. We're exploring the idea of creating a standardized format for product change notices and discontinuation notices. We've been pulling our hair out trying to come up with parts management metrics that allow the return, that really show the return on investment of doing good parts management. There aren't many out there, along with new obsolescence metrics that are looking at supply availability indicators. So if you have any ideas, please let me know. We've created software, DMSMS management training, and added information in the SD22 DMSMS guidebook. And of course, we're doing training and outreach. And speaking of training, we will in September of 2021 have our first ever Defense Acquisition University Parts and Material Lifecycle Management credential. It consists of about 13 courses for approximately 34 hours. You can also find all of these resources and so much more on our parts management and DMS's knowledge sharing portals that are designed to be providers of DMSMS and parts management related information, tools, policy and guidance, training. It has a documented library. And all you need is a DAU ID to access, and that's fairly easy to get. So the next slide. So in conclusion, good parts management is key to success. When you need to, we need to start parts and DMSMS management early, way early, before, pre-milestone A or its equivalent, and continue through sustainment. Make sure your contracts are right. If you don't require a parts and DMSMS management program or criteria for parts selection, it's not likely going to happen. We should be influencing design to make them DMSMS resilient. Create technology roadmaps and refresh plans and follow them, please. We will not be able to avoid all risks, so make sure that you have a proactive DMSMS management program that will help increase your window of opportunity to make more cost-effective decisions. There's an entire parts and DMSMS management community and resources out there for you to tap into. So don't suffer in silence. There are people there to be able to help you. And remember, if you don't do this, pay me now, you will pay me more, a lot more later. So next slide. So thank you again for your time and your attention. And I hope with that we have some time for a few questions.